Somebody needs to fill my cup.
Dan O'Connor. Welcome to Easy Talk, brother.
Thanks for having me.
We book these guests in advance, and sometimes the timing is, some would say, divine. First and foremost, man, before we get into any topics, you're just like a real OG of STL MMA, a pioneer. I remember when I was coming up, my very first amateur fight, you were like one of the guys, just like rambunctious in the back, like, a huge personality, character. You've been in the game now for what, 20-something years, man?
Close. Yeah, something like that. I've been doing
Jesus
jiu-jitsu
Christ.
since '06 now, I think, so close to 20.
So, I mean, I guess before we get into anything of like relevance, if you could summate your time in martial arts, how would you look back on it?
I loved it, man. It definitely kept me in check and kept my mental game where it needed to be. Because I mean, I noticed I'm a super depressed person when I'm not training, and training the way it just keeps me just mentally sound and keeps me from being too outrageous when I'm not. If I'm not training, I'm drinking, and that's never a good thing for me. So
You just told me beforehand, because I offered you a drink, not necessarily alcoholic, but just a drink in general, and you told me like, no, you're good. I brought my own, and you say that you don't drink that much anymore.
no, I cut back quite a bit. I was my kids aren't a big fan of my drinking, so I'm not like an asshole when I drink around my kids, but I'm a little bit extra. I'm extra already, so you add alcohol to it. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. So I'll be bouncing around and being a little too crazy. The kids are like, oh, I don't know. They don't see dad like that very often. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to make sure I don't ever drink around them. And I'm around them all the time. So I don't really drink much anymore.
How old are the kids?
My daughter is 18 and my son is 10.
Gotcha.
Son's boxing now and everything. It's pretty fun.
No shit.
Yep.
Hold on to that thought. Before we get to it, was it a conversation that was had? Was it like?
No, it wasn't a conversation. It was just, I kind of saw I drank with them around St. Patty's Day where I got a little bit extra, and they kind of were just, they looked at me a little different. I didn't like it, so I stopped.
Like it.
Yeah, that's
Good job,
basically all it
Danny.
was.
Good job, Danny.
So I'm pretty self-aware with a lot of things in life. So
Your son started boxing. What's
Yep.
that feel like as a father?
it's awesome. He's getting bullied at school. So
He is or was?
He was.
Was.
He was.
Past tense boxing.
He was. He's a big kid. He's top 97th percentile in his height and weight. He's a big kid. He's up to my chin, up a little past my chin. It's pretty crazy. But he was getting bullied, and he came downstairs and I was shadow boxing. I was right after my neck injury. I got all the rods in my neck, and he was like, "Hey, can I learn how to fight?" I'm like, "Kid, I've been waiting your whole life for you to ask me this." So I started training him, and now I teach boxing over at the Hammock Brothers Boxing. I have a bunch of
nice.
kids there yet. Teach over there Tuesdays and Thursday nights. So and Kane has his first fight coming up. Looks like I think it's July 20th or something like that. 20th, 13th, something like that.
At 10 years, oh yeah, amateur boxing.
Yep,
Yeah, they
amateur
actually,
boxing.
for some reason, I thought MMA for the briefest of moments. But yeah, dude, you're right. They have amateur boxing as young as what, 8?
It's pretty cool to watch him. He's the sweetest kid in the world, and he's not aggressive at all. And so I wasn't sure how he was gonna do with it, but he gets hit, and I see me immediately. His eyes light up, and he's like, "Oh, let's go!" And he just starts meleeing people. It's fun to watch.
Insert every meme about seeing red.
But I was the same person. I was like, on my fights, it's like I didn't either won in the first round really quick, or I was getting my butt kicked in the first round, and then I would submit people because it would take me getting hit to get into the fight.
When you look back at your MMA career, do you often talk about it with your kids? Is it brought up often, or is it like something that you kind of look at as like a past life?
It's kind of like a past life. I've had a few past lives, and that's one of them. My daughter knows about it. She'll talk about it. Her boyfriend does martial arts, and
nice.
she made him watch all of my fights before he asked her out. So that was fun. The kid's terrified of me now, and I was like, I'm really a nice guy, I promise. You just see me covered in blood in most of my fights, so it looks a little scarier.
Do you look back with pride?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't look at it. I don't look at it as pioneer or anything like that, like some people were calling me recently. But I mean, I had fun doing it. I did it for fun, and I did it to keep the demons away, if you will. So I kind of look at it as that way.
Why wouldn't you say the word pioneer?
I just don't see it. I don't think of myself as highly as other people think of me. Clearly, I mean, I wasn't. I always looked at it as I made it to the show a couple times. I wasn't good enough to stay to the show, and there's so many guys in St. Louis that are so much better than me that are out in the UFC now, and it just looks. I mean, I just don't see it. I don't see them on their level, you know.
Well, I mean, there's okay. So if I may, there seems to be like a reverence and a respect that you have for the current athletes, which, dude, I'm all for. Amazing, and kudos to you. But there's also a sort of like undershadowing of your accomplishments as well. I mean, surely you understand that like it's not apples to apples, the correlation and the comparing yourself to the fighters today. I mean, when you were coming up, man, I remember my very first fight at the Heart of St. Charles for Jim Jenkins. I mean, I came from wrestling, so like everything was pretty stringent, and you know, if you were like .1 over on the wrestling in wrestling season, like you weren't wrestling that day, or you'd have to bump up. I remember coming into my first amateur fight. This was before the state were sanctioning it, and by the way, when I was coming up was a different time from when you were coming up, so I'm sure it was even more wild, wild west. I think, if I may, you can still put yourself up there because when you were coming up, the landscape was completely different, my man. I don't even think the UFC had 125 men when you were coming up. So it wasn't even like you necessarily could fight even if it did exist, right? It's like, not that it didn't exist, but like you couldn't fight for the UFC because they didn't even have your weight class.
Yeah.
I think, if I may, you would be pleasantly surprised if you heard how people talked about you behind your back.
I was pretty shocked at seeing some of the stuff people said about me. I mean, I don't hold myself in that higher regard. I just always felt like it was kind of a douchey thing to do, to think you're the hot shit, or you're the best thing, or you're the goat of whatever they think you're the goat of. I was like, the guys usually say they're a goat, they're not. Yeah. So, and they sometimes they need to take it down a notch or two.
How do you combat that with the personality that you had when you did fight? Because I was the same way. I mean, we were both brash talkers, but like I always said that MMA was like the perfect sport to talk shit in, because at the end of the day, you're gonna punch me in the face.
Well, shit talking is something I've always been really good at, but the brash part, I mean, a lot of it was just you're putting on a show for people. That's what the people got. You're not just doing a fight. You got to put on a show for these people. They're buying tickets. If you go out there and you take a guy down, you double leg him, you hold him down for 3 rounds, they don't want to see that either. They want to see a finish. They want to see cool stuff. So the build up for the fight, also the walkout and all that, that's part of the show for everybody. And some of these guys, they never picked that up. So that's why they never took off.
Do you think MMA now has become more sport, less spectacle?
I don't know, man. Depends on who you're talking about, really. I mean, you got Conor McGregor, and he's definitely a spectacle. There's a couple other guys. I have a few guys. The one guy.
Well, let me change the paradigm of the question. More locally speaking, like today, like I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it's because I'm like a year or two removed from my career personally, but like the last Nemesis show I went to, I didn't know half the card. Right now, that's also because me, like I'm not necessarily in the loop on local MMA like I used to be when I was competing. But I thought to myself, like, is that a reflection of the promoting aspect of the fighters? Is it a reflection of the fighters promoting themselves? Like, why don't I know half this card?
And that's a big thing of it. One of the things I was trying to help when I was coming up, and I was learning how to promote. These kids did not know how to promote themselves. They didn't know how to make money. So I was trying to teach these guys how to make money. So you're definitely right. There's a lack of promotion, and it probably is a little less of a spectacle and more of a fight rather than anything. You don't see a lot of guys going out there trying to have their name on people's lips, where they're gonna as soon as you say I'm gonna have a fight coming up, people aren't jumping down your door. They're waiting to the week of the fight to try and buy tickets, kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jim Jenkins used to say this about you, that you were one of the best. Like you were the guy who understood how to make the most amount of money in MMA. I remember he would use you as an example of like how to sell tickets, how to sell merchandise, how to promote yourself to sponsors, all these other things. Do you think that one of the things that's missing in local MMA, I'm going to rephrase that, not local MMA, but MMA in general, is everyone is trying to be the best fighter, which is obviously the sport. Like you could be the best trash talker, you could be the best promoter, but if you can't fight, doesn't matter, right? But do you think that has to be like a pie chart of this, where a portion of that effort needs to also be spent on how to communicate properly, how to market yourself, how to make the most use out of social media, and brand every fight as if it's a spectacle?
And 100%. And these kids aren't branding themselves either. So they're not going and talking themselves up. They're not going and.
But how would you though? Like when you say like these kids aren't doing it, like the only promotion that I fought for that actually did like pre-fight interviews was Shamrock. So like Shamrock understood the value of that. I don't know if Nemesis does that. I don't think they do. Matt? No, so they don't. Like, that's maybe something that they can start doing as well. Because, like, I remember the very first fight I had for Shamrock was against Cortavius Romeus. And I remember they put me in front of a camera, and this was the first time that I've ever been put in front of a camera before a fight. So I was just like, hey, this is how I feel. And I mean, I think that video had like 10,000 views. That was the easiest I ever had time of like selling out of the tickets that I had on hand. Terribly sorry to interrupt the content that you're enjoying right now, but if you've been watching our content for the past couple of months, you realize that Easy Talk is a brand new podcast. We're genuinely trying to figure this thing out as we're going. Some growing pains for sure. If you are genuinely enjoying this content, we feel very humble in that, but we would like to ask that you would also subscribe and like to the channel, simply because it does help us in the algorithms and ultimately to grow. So take a second. I'd really appreciate it. And on with the show. And
yourself, you were being yourself too. That's the big thing about it. A lot of these guys, either they don't know how to be themselves, or they freak out when the camera comes on, or whatever it is. But I see all these kids coming up, and there's some great fighters, and they don't. You have social media, and that's a huge thing nowadays. You could be talking up your fight and talking about what you're going to do to the guy, or how you think the fight's going to go. Just talk a little shit. You got to believe it, but you got to talk a little bit of shit.
I don't even know if it's talking shit, Danny, or if it's just exert your confidence.
Yeah.
I hate it when guys are like, in front of a camera, they're like, oh, well, I hope the fight's going to go well and my opponent and me leave both up. No, man, it's like, say all the shit that you're saying at training camp. You know what's funny? People used to harp on me for the shit that I would say in front of the camera. I would say half the rancid stuff that I would hear other guys talk about in like the sauna, cutting weight, in between rounds when we were sparring. I mean, if you want to talk about like, there's not a single fighter I know that wasn't like supremely confident and all that. The only difference between them and me was I was willing to say it in front of the camera.
Same here. I was like, I didn't care. I was like, shut me up. That's what I always thought.
You're going to get your opportunity.
You're going to get a chance to beat me up. You'll see if you can do it. And some did. Some did. A lot didn't.
There's a part of me that looks at social media as like, it's not even, I don't even think it is social media anymore. I feel like it's just basically direct to consumer marketing at this point, but for the individual. Similar to how like YouTube could be looked at as like the removal of like these big Hollywood executive types where like you could produce and we can film our own content and we can post our own content. Same thing with social media. Like I don't need to buy a commercial on cable television. I can just promote myself now. And I think there's a good and a bad dichotomy to that, but overall it's still a net positive, especially because it's decentralized power, which I'm always a fan of. To bring it back though, we would be not doing it justice to explain. Shut up. The past 2 weeks have been eventful. Can you briefly describe to me the emotions that you felt and were going through when you were having this altercation with a local MMA media personality?
Which one are you talking about? I get in arguments all the time on Facebook. You talking about that crazy podcast chick?
Here's what I'm gonna say. We can have the discussion.
Oh, okay.
We can have the discussion, but let's not. I don't want to. I don't want to use the. I'll tell you what it is, Danny. I want to have this conversation, but I don't want to. She's not here to defend herself. We can have a conversation of the high level, but let's just not attack her.
I'm not.
So
that's not what I'm here for, anyways.
Yeah, beautiful.
She
okay.
Look, she's been. I heard it put a couple really good ways by people smarter than me. One person said she's been digging her own grave for a couple weeks, and I just shoved her in and threw the dirt on her. She's been running her mouth saying that she was the GOAT, and she's done more for St. Louis MMA than in the last 6 months anybody's done in the last 10 years. That's a slap in the face to all of my coaches, all my training partners, everybody that's fought in the last 10 years, me included. I was trying to stay out of it. I was doing my absolute best to stay out of it because some of the shit she was saying was really pissing me off. But I was like, you know what? Technically, she's not talking about me. So all St. Louis MMA fighters are losers. Was that one of them?
Yeah.
She said some outlandish shit. She was being out of pocket. She just needed she got a little bit of fame, and I think she thought she was a lot hotter shit than she was. So when I was staying out of it, and she jumped in and started talking smack to me. And one thing I'm very good at is talking shit. I had to learn how to fight because I was so good at talking shit. I would get adults swinging at me. So
I had to learn how to fight He's like, I got so good at talking shit.
So I grew up in North County. That's what we did. We talked shit. I got really, really good at it. So she started running her mouth to me, and I brought her down a couple notches.
I will say that, we booked these guests in advance, and when we did book Bree before we did the podcast, literally her and Danny had the falling out, and when we had her on, I told her, I was like, hey, like, let's just not even talk about it, because I just didn't think it was anything of value, to be completely honest with you. I don't really want to have a conversation about like a falling out in a relationship. And then vice versa, when Danny was on, I was just like, hey, like, I don't really want to talk about her. If you don't want to talk about her, I would prefer not to.
And Danny won't.
But then what I was noticing was, over the course of time, the communications that I saw were getting more and more aggressive, more and more hyperbolic, and if I could be so bold as to say, filled with pride. And it was, I didn't really care, because I was just like, whatever, you know what I mean? However, when the comment was made, when she posted the comment saying, I had done more in 1 year than all of you losers combined, and like whatever, you know what I mean? I thought to myself, ooh, like, I don't think you understand how you're going to bring everyone together, because now everyone's got a common foe. I don't know if you understood what you were doing when you put that out there.
And some of the stuff she was doing, she was like, best way I can explain it, she was walking online kicking pit bulls, and then she would act like a victim when the pit bull bit her. Like, it attacked me out of nowhere. No. You've been doing this for weeks now. And she was picking on Lance DeClue. Who messes with that? She was talking shit on Lance DeClue. Who talks shit on Lance DeClue? He's literally the nicest person I've ever met. It's wild. She was going down and just screwing with all these guys who were fighters, and Mophead and Drew can't really defend themselves because they teach kids classes, and it's gonna turn sideways. Danny's too nice, but then she started talking shit to me, and I don't give a fuck. So.
Yeah. It was weird to see the double-edged sword of both aggressor and victim at the same time being played out. It begs the question of how could this happen? Because in real time, I was seeing some of the most aggressive, some of the most deadly men that I know essentially being threatened with silence, because if anything was said, certain words were being used. Misogynist, woman hater, all these other things. And what was weird to me was the reaction from people who did not know any of the nuance, did not know any of the actual interactions to and from, kind of defending it. Social media is weird to me, Danny, because we can all voice our opinions, and when we come together with it, it actually starts to become fact. Like, for instance, if I say Danny O'Connor is an asshole, that's one opinion. But if I go on there and I get 1,000 likes and I get 100 people commenting, yeah, fuck Danny, well, now my opinion of Danny has slowly but surely become kind of like a fact.
Yep. Those guys that are doing that, they're literally the scum of the earth, in my opinion.
What do you mean by those guys?
Those guys
that are
like backing her when she's talking shit about all these fighters and pretending I
wouldn't go that far. Scum of the earth?
No, yeah, I will. I will say that, because these are the same guys I watch used to bring flowers and candies to strippers when I worked at the strip club. They're the same exact people. They're the vultures waiting in the wings, hiding, looking at a prey that's about to die and hoping they can swoop down and steal a scrap of pussy at the end. Those are the same freaking guys that are hoping to get laid maybe by this girl because they're backing her. Like, oh, you're so awesome. Dude, I listened to her podcast. I watched all the stuff that was going down. I was like, I'm going to give her a chance. I listened to her podcast. It wasn't,
Listen, I like I said, I don't want to talk about the...
I don't either, but...
I guess what I'm trying to say is, oh man, this is a tough conversation to navigate through, so bear with me.
Yep.
What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to come to an understanding of how we got to this point. Does that make sense? Or
Yes.
how that point was even achieved. My whole thing was, you kind of said something earlier when you were like, I had to learn how to fight because I was so good at talking shit. Well, with regards to how she was acting, it makes me think, like, who was in your inner circle? Like, who was in your ear? Who were you, like, talking to? Like, before you made these posts, before you threw this out there, did anyone tell you, like, hey, maybe don't do that?
Dudes that are trying to bang her. That's 100% it. That's there's no other reason rhyme or reason for anybody doing any of that stuff you're saying, other than guys that are hoping to possibly get laid. I mean, if you can think of another answer for that, I would love to hear it, but I can't think of it. I truly do hope the best for the girl. I hope she learned her lesson from all this. But she just got a little too. Listen, it happened to me when I started getting some fame, a little too much fame. I started getting my head a little too big, and somebody had to check me. I've had older OGs tell me, "Hey man, listen, you're thinking you're a lot hotter than you are. You're gonna get some losses coming." And I'm like, okay. And I was like, you know what? They're right. I need to reel it in a notch. And that's what I think she needs to do. She needs to reel it in a notch and reset and figure out what she needs to do from there.
Do you think the reputation is salvageable?
I don't know. I think anything's salvageable. I think it is. But you know, she would have to work on herself quite a bit, fix some of the stuff that she thinks, the way she thinks is a big problem. We can't have the Me Too movement was great for certain ways, and then it was bad for others. I mean, there's a lot of people that were thrown under the bus that didn't do anything wrong, and we found out in the court that the chick said it and we demonized the guy. There's a recent football player, I believe. He was on All-American baseball player. Yeah, it was my bad. I'm not good with sports.
No, you're good.
I just read about it, and he was demonized, and they found out that none of it happened. The chick was completely
now he's suing the MLB for back pay and all these other things.
Good, and he deserves it.
Yeah,
because I mean, there's nothing worse than being called stuff that you never did.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous slope. I know that, you know, I speak to younger guys. It is the death of chivalry came at the hands of feminism. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that, you know, there isn't a place for a feminist movement. There's not a place for. I have a daughter, and I want her truly to feel no different in how she interacts with the world than how a man does.
Correct.
However, there are fundamental differences between the two sexes. You know, navigate that accordingly. However, societally, there should be equality, is what I would always say. The problem is, I feel like the pendulum swung way too far, and now you're going to have to hit some point to get back to equilibrium. I think you said it best, where you were like, was there some good from the Me Too movement? Honestly, yes. When I was growing up, you know, there was no real justification or acceptance for any of that weird shit. You know what I mean? Like if there was a guy kind of not walking in line with other men or possibly looking to, you know, prey on women or something like that, at least me and the group of friends that I was with, there was an end to that pretty quick, right? Was there a culture of, you know, misogyny, a culture of all these, you know, toxic masculine traits? Of course.
Yes.
There's extremes on both ends. But I think the movement was basically looking for anything that looked like a nail. So now guys across are just like petrified of even possibly, like I said this to some of my friends that are girls that are dating, and I'm just like, because they're complaining about the dating field, and I'm like, you guys are the ones to blame for all of this. Like they got so angry at me when I told them, I was like, you are all upset with men lowering their standards when you're the ones who set them. Women are the ones who set them. It's like, if you're willing to sleep with a guy without any sort of commitment, why would a guy commit to you? Right. If you're going to make accusations at a man who could possibly just, you know, be navigating this world, like, because dating is fucking hard. It's hard to approach women. It's hard to say something on the fly. It's hard to go up to a girl at a bar and like, how do I get your attention? How do I show it that I'm interested? How do I get you interested? How do I navigate this in real time? And by the way, if I fail, I'm a loser or I'm creepy or I'm all these other things. And it's like, when women realize that, like, for the last 5 years, all they've been doing is making that initial interaction so fucking hard. And then they get mad that, like, no, where are all the men at? Where are all this at? Dude, if I was a single guy, fuck that, Danny. I wouldn't take the chance. You're out of your mind.
Look, all the new gym stuff. The guy will be in the gym, and the chick will come up, and it's all nonstop chicks video and guys. Why were you staring at me? Why some of the guys like, I wasn't staring at nothing. You were in front of the mirror. I'm lifting weights in front of the mirror, making sure I'm hitting the delts where I'm supposed to be hitting, make sure my back's straight. And they're just going off on guys. It's getting almost comedic.
I want to be careful how I word this, but because I don't want to say that, you know, there aren't these guys out there.
There 100% are.
There 100% are. But the exception doesn't make the rule. And I feel like men need to be men again, or this trajectory of unhappiness between both the sexes is only going to continue. And it has dire ramifications for the long-term stability and health of this nation, which I know that might sound hyperbolic, but if people aren't coming together, if men and women are not coming together, having children, making families, coming together to pool resources and to rear children, the next generation, we are the arbiters of the world until we're not. What else are we doing here? What is all of this for, if not to like leave it to the next generation? And if, you know, there's a growing trend of like, what do they call it? Dual income, no children, right? Something like that. That's such an insane concept to me. I don't even understand why you're together if not to proliferate and to create. I said this to my wife. Let me know if you agree with me. If you are with a woman and barring any sort of physical ailments that could prevent you from having children, okay, I understand that there are people out there that can't have kids. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. But like if you both are healthy and you say you love that person but don't want to have kids, I don't know if you really love them. Because my wife is such like an amazing individual that like she exemplifies so many good characteristics, intelligence, humor, humility, all these things that like I look at her and I'm like, we should have children. Like you should spread this to our children as much as we can. Like you should have. You're the kind of person that should have kids, and I'm honored to have kids with you. Like I don't know if I'm explaining this properly, but like I love you so much. We should do this.
I agree with you on that, but I do know people that when they got together, neither wanted to have kids. Whether it's because they had terrible childhoods and they're scared they're going to be their parents. Those
fair.
There are exceptions to the rule, obviously, but all in all, I do believe I'm the same. I'm on your side with that. There are exceptions to the rule. I know people that I know a chick, Barb Honchak and her man. They never wanted to have kids. They just did not want to have kids.
Did they ever say why though?
They just didn't like kids.
Wow.
I'd have my daughter around. They were cool with my daughter, but they didn't want. They were like, "Yeah, it's
they just
cool."
Didn't want kids of their
we
own?
didn't want. We can get rid of her after we're done playing with her.
Man, maybe it's just the way I was raised. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. That's just,
I only have 2 kids, and I wish I had more.
I wish I had. I want 5. I want 6.
I wanted way more. My wife couldn't have kids anymore, so we got our 2, and I was like,
you got 2.
Yep, I got a girl and a boy. And I'm happy with
If
that.
there's ever a thing I can go back in time and give myself a message about, it would be like, don't wait for the perfect time. I thought that I would need all this money and all these resources and all this shit to have kids, and then when we had the kid, I was just like, oh, this is. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is simultaneously the hardest thing I've ever done and the easiest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And had I known what I knew now, I would have had kids when I was like 22, 23, 24, instead of 29.
I had my daughter is 18 now. I'm 41, so it's about 23, 24, something like that. I'm not good at math.
Carry the one.
Somewhere around there. But yeah, I was super happy. We got my wife got knocked up on our honeymoon because she was like, she goes, everybody's trying for years trying to have kids. I was like, all right, well, we'll start trying. And I wasn't sure I could have kids because I had a lot of girlfriends when I was growing up, and I never had even had a pregnancy scare. She got pregnant on the first try. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, that's how Bruna was. Sorry, that's how my wife was. She was on the pill, and we were like, whatever. Anyway, the first time it was like a one-shot gun.
Yeah.
I was like, Jesus, well,
It's that high testosterone, baby.
dude, I don't know. I don't know. I was in the middle of camp, dude. I was like, my body was like destroyed. I was like low T.
Maybe it's the Albanian blood.
Maybe it's the Albanian blood. No, you said that you were kind of shocked at the mass reaction and the love that you received. Why were you shocked at the MMA community coming together behind you?
I've been retired 5 years, I had my last fight in 2019. I just didn't, again, I don't think that highly of myself. I had fun fighting. I tried to help out as many fighters as I possibly could. I've held lots of guys in the back room after they lost and they were crying and stuff. I was just kind of shocked about it. I didn't understand. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought they were trolling her. When people are like, he's the GOAT, he's the icon and shit. I'm like, I've never said that about myself once in my life or thought that about myself. So I was kind of surprised to hear people say that about me. I was like, does this what people really think about me?
Yeah, but I feel like you're kind of correlating your personal achievement with your interactions with individuals. I mean, you could be the worst fighter ever and still be the best guy behind the scenes. And I think what people are trying to resonate with you, Danny, is like, through all the bullshit that you say and all that other stuff, I mean, the interactions I've had with you have been nothing but pleasant. You've been nothing but supportive of me to all my endeavors. And not just me. I've seen it with other fighters as well. So
nothing I love seeing more than my friends succeed. I like it more than seeing myself succeed. I love seeing my friends succeed because I know how hard they work. I watch it from the sidelines. I watch how hard everybody's doing everything when they're training their butt off. If they lose, I'm the first person to make sure I'll talk to them. Sometimes I have to give them I have to be a little too honest with them. Like, you quit. I saw you quit. You know you quit. Yeah, you're right. I did. Okay. Well, here's how we fix this. You can't. You got to do this way. Or if they lose a fight, and I was like, that's the best they looked. I'll make sure that I'll give them all the ups because they're already down. You don't talk bad. You don't talk down to somebody. And I could bring up another thing that girl said that really bothered me, but we won't get any further into it.
Yeah, I know. I heard about.
It was that was one of the reasons I almost. I mean, I could have went way further into that, and I'm glad that she stopped talking, and I'm glad that she bowed out when she did because it was about to get bad. But not to bring it back up. Not to come back to that spot.
I get it, man. It's you know what it's felt like, Danny, for like the last 3 weeks. It's like everyone's kind of tiptoeing around the issue, or like not the issue, but the topic in general.
Yeah,
and it brings up an interesting point about STL MMA, and that's we seem to be a very dramatic community.
Mm-hmm.
But when push comes to shove, when the UFC comes to St. Louis, we're sitting here and we had set the record. I mean, it's been since we set the record, it's been broken, but we set a new record for gate for the UFC in St. Louis. And I mean, if there's no greater metric for support, I mean, that would probably be the one, right? It's like, we are willing to support you with our cold hard cash, all the guys that came up. But I think the reason because I've been thinking about this all week before this, like leading up to this conversation, I think the reason for the animosity, the reason for all like the back and forth, the backstabbing, because I'll tell you this, if you put like Mop, Mike Rogers, Jared Block, Eric Steenberg, Jamie Crozen, if you put all these guys, Steve Berger, you put all these guys in a room, they all shake each other's hands. Hey, how you doing? You want to know how I know that? Every fight is like a high school reunion from all these gyms. And then as soon as we separate, it's like bickering amongst children afterwards. I think it all stems from scarcity. Mm-hmm. I think in this sport, it's dog eat dog. And the problem is, I said this in the Danny episode, I'll repeat myself today. When the local promotions pit, Jamie Crozen's kickboxer against St. Charles MMA kickboxer, forgive them if tensions flare and emotions rise and, well, you know what, fuck you, and you come from a shittier gym, you're not one of us. And the problem with that is if you take that like that isolated incident, extrapolate it to a whole card, 5 cards, 10 cards a year, Wolves Den versus St. Charles versus Jamie Crozen versus the Church versus ES MMA, like, you're trying to be the biggest fish in a small pond, and I feel like we've missed the mark. But with that being said, I feel like it's something that everyone knows. Yeah. And that's, we are trying to get as many guys to the big show as possible. We are trying to get that rising tide, lift all boats. Yep. Do you think I'm onto something when I talk about scarcity?
Yeah, it's definitely a crabs in the bucket mentality. Everybody's trying to climb on top of each other to get to the top. I hate it. I never had it personally because I have trained at almost every gym in St. Louis. And I'm friends with Rogers.
But you cross-trained. You never how did you get into it?
I trained at Rogers Gym. I trained at Burger's Gym. I left Burger's Gym to go to Rogers Gym. And I cross-trained with almost everybody. And I've helped out other gyms. I've had fighters from other gyms that were having trouble in camp paying for stuff. And I was like, if I had the money, I'd toss money towards them. Or if there was somebody that was coming up and they needed a 125er that they was like, hey, we got this, we're fighting this guy, he's out of town, will you come in? I said, absolutely, I'll come in and help those guys. So I guess I kind of have friends at every gym in St. Louis. So that's the one thing where I've brought people together best I could when shit was going sideways. I always tried to make sure, like, hey man, here, why don't you guys talk about this, as opposed to keep arguing behind each other's backs. So
yeah, I how did you navigate that then? How is it that this community can be so divisive, yet you can have an individual, because I did the same thing. I didn't really cross-train too much. I've been to every gym in the area. Like, I was at CMAA, and then I even cross-trained a little bit with Daniel's Block back when he had MCS over in North County. Then I went to St. Charles MMA, stopped by Steve Berger's for a moment there when I was thinking about what gym I wanted to go to. Then I went to Wolves Den when Mop had maybe 250 square feet of mat, maybe. I was at Wolves Den when they first started, and then I landed at Finney's, and I've been there ever since. Not because, none of these gyms were like good or bad or any of these things. It was just like what made logistical sense for me at the
Which
time.
fit you properly.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. And at that specific moment of my career. That being said, it it does shock me how long it took to repair some of those bridges after I left.
It is sad. I mean, you see Rogers. I mean, you talked. I just listened to the Burger episode the other day. Rogers and Burger were best friends. I was like, and I've heard stories. They don't talk shit about each other, but they'll tell me stories about each other. I heard some that you would never believe. I still laugh about. And I'll bring up the Burger or Rogers once in a while. I'll tell the story that the other one told. They're like, you fucking asshole. So it's sad that they're still not best friends, because I still think, like we were bringing up, is like if them two would have got together in the beginning, man,
Who knows?
who knows
But
what
when I
happened.
talk to Steve, I mean, the other variable is the individuals. I mean, like I say that, like, you know, at every fight we come together, we shake hands, and we're like, "Hey, buddy," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like maybe that's because it's only 2-3 hours, and it's easy to be cordial and respectful for
Yeah.
2-3 hours. Maybe Danny, I'm completely wrong. Maybe these people do hate each other, and there's like, you know, there's animosity and all this other stuff. But I like to think like I know the kind of person Drew and Grande is. I know the kind of person Mike Rogers is. I know the kind of person Steve Berger is. You are. I know all these people, and I like all of these people. How is it that I can like all of these people, yet there's like animosity and friction between one of them? I think it's scarcity.
Yeah,
Perhaps I'm wrong.
There's also I have a lot of friends, and I have friends that I'm friends with everybody. I'm friends just about. I know everybody in St. Louis. Some of my friends hate each other. I was like, I don't know why they hate each other. They have their reasons for hating each other, and they sometimes it's just, he rubs me the wrong way. I'm like, well, I go and hang out with him on a Friday. I hang out with you on a Saturday. I was like, you guys are a lot alike, and that's what I think it really is the same mentality, and it's just two freaking two Rams butting heads all the time. That's what I really think it is everybody has the same kind of mentality. Everyone's not just crabs in a bucket, but the same mentality, and I think that's a big part of it too, because they're all alpha males.
Do you
know?
think there's ever a moment where we can get over it?
I would hope. I don't know what it would take. If I could figure out how to do it, I would be the one doing it.
Someone make the argument that you brought them together a week ago.
I had people on that post who were like, I hate the guy, but you're completely wrong. I was like, I know that guy does hate me.
Dude, it's you know, nothing brings people together like a common enemy.
That's
Jesus
true.
Christ.
I hate that. I hate that turned into that. Really, I did. I was like, I was like, when she started, I could tell she was mentally unstable after a little while. I was like, I'm stopping. I was like, as soon as I realized she was mentally unstable, I was like,
It's speculation. We don't know that for sure. I'm sure she's just fine.
my mom was my mom committed suicide. My mom was bipolar and manic, and I can smell manic through a post, and she's definitely manic in my opinion. But
Yeah, I'm gonna respectfully just pivot from that one. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on outside of MMA was your ability to multitask throughout your life, because fighting wasn't the only thing you were doing. I mean, you were also competing, yes. You were training, you were being a father, you were working side jobs, all these other things. Can you briefly describe to me the hustler's mentality that you have when you were coming up, filling out a 24-hour day? Because you were doing a lot of things, Dan.
yeah, well, I grew up poor, dirt poor, man. My parents got divorced. My dad told my mom and dad had an agreement that she could have both of the kids if he didn't have to pay child support ever. And my mom also was a gambling addict, so we were homeless a lot as a kid. So I had to learn how to make money really young, and so I've always been able to hustle. So I learned how to hustle out of necessity, but I got really good at it. I mean, I've done some crazy stuff to make money. I've barbecued at the strip club, as we talked before. I've done a lot of things. I've gotten in trouble with the law for some of the stuff I did to make money. So I just had to figure out ways to make money, and to this day, I told my wife, I was like, we'll never be homeless. I was like, I'll always figure out ways to make money, and I'll always figure out ways to hustle. Like I was one of those bringing on T-shirts and stuff in the fight community. Nobody was doing T-shirts. And I was trying to teach guys how to do the same stuff. Like, hey, don't put a giant picture of your face on there unless it's a rest in peace shirt, man. So you can't do that. Nobody wants to wear this stuff. I said, buy really nice shirts. Here's how you get sponsors. Go talk to these guys.
How do you get sponsors?
Super easy, man. If you can pick up chicks, you can get sponsors. All you gotta do is walk in and show them, like, I sell this many tickets. This is how many people are gonna be at the card. They're going to put it on TV. They're going to have it on this. There's going to be hundreds of people. I'm going to put you on my banner. I'll put you on my T-shirt. My T-shirts, I'm going to sell 100 T-shirts or 50 T-shirts. They're really nice. This is the thing. I'll give you a T-shirt too. These are tri-blend, like I do with my wife's T-shirts. I do the same stuff. These are tri-blend. People are gonna wear them all the time, so it's not just one day you're getting your name on the back of a T-shirt where somebody's gonna be standing in line behind them like, I never heard of that bar. I've never heard of that restaurant. I've never heard of that. You know what? I am looking for how to grow hydroponics, if you will. You know, I got that on there. You know what? I need to check that place out, and they'll write it down, or they'll look it up, or they'll ask you about it. I was like, I got so many people extra business from sponsoring me. So the bars after the fight, I never had trouble doing that because I did one fight, and they were like, "There's 500 people here." I was like, "I only sold 100 tickets, so I have no idea who the rest of these guys are."
You might need to do like a master class or like maybe do a YouTube channel yourself of how to do that, because I got to be honest with you. I'm not going to name any names, but when I tell you how many fighters have come up to me asking me to sponsor them, and I just look at them and I think to myself like, okay, kid, like I had one gentleman who came up to me. He said, "I'm going to be the next big thing." I go, "Hey, cool, that's great." He's like, "Yeah, you'd be lucky to get with me now when it's cheap." And I looked at him and I was like, I cannot explain to you how much you've lost me.
Yeah, you got to show them what they're getting out of it. They're not going to do it just because you're talking to them. You got to show what they're going to gain, because a business is running a business. If you're gonna come up and let's say you're going for a bar, and the bar's like, "Man, how much do you want? I want $1,000 for you to sponsor me, but I'm bringing in all of my friends, da 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 da, and this is how many tickets I'm going to sell. My friends are going to drink heavily. How about this? How about you pay me 500, and then if you make this amount of money, you pay me another 500. Now, it's not always the greatest thing to do with a bar, because most people are going to try and screw you. But if you have a good bar that you know is not going to screw you, you can get away with it. I always had good sponsors from that, because I'd walk in, I usually had a little layout. Here's my record. Here's the guys I fought. Here's their record. Here's what this is going to be on. This is how many people are going to be at the venue. This is how many it holds. It's going to be a TV. You're getting 2 free tickets to the fight, so you can come and you can talk up your bar while you're there. You're getting You're getting 2 VIP seats, and you're getting T-shirts to my fight, and you can do all this. You got to show them your worth. That's the big thing. You got to show them your worth, or you're not going to get the sponsorship.
I guess the only other thing I would say about this topic is it seems like it's an incredible skill set to acquire that the second you get to the highest echelon of the sport is worthless.
Yep.
So can we
wild.
briefly just talk about the UFC and how they handle sponsorships? What are your thoughts on it?
It's the same way they were doing it before, where you can't have sponsors.
You can't have sponsors.
You can't have sponsors, which is ridiculous.
Well, you can't. Okay, you can, but you can't. It's really weird, like the way they have it. So like anything on like Fight Week or anything like that, that's not like their approved sponsor list. Go fuck yourself, right? But it's like if you are off camp, and like Sugar Sean O'Malley will have a Sanibel sponsorship, and it's like, well, that's not Venom, right? But he doesn't have anything Sanibel on like the week of the fight or leading up to the fight or anything like that, or at any of the press conferences, which then begs the question of like, if you're Sanibel. And this is where I'm kind of leading this conversation. It used to be that these fighters would have to learn how to acquire sponsors for this evening, and then the proliferation of that evening, right? It's like you were saying, like, hey, I'm gonna fight that night. I'm gonna sell 100 T-shirts, and of those 100 T-shirts, those people are gonna go to the gyms, they're gonna go to the bars, and they're gonna see your logo. But now I feel like to be a good monetary steward as a fighter, you have to have, you know, a podcast, a social media presence, all these other things, because that's what the sponsors are going to want more than even fighting. Fighting is like...
Yeah.
Ben Lawler and the Tom James family will ensure that whether you're purchasing your first custom fit suit or your 50th, the process is unrivaled. With the experience and quality of the Tom James name, allow Ben Lawler to help shape the vision that is your professional brand with a suit that speaks to the conviction in their craft. With fabric sourced here in the U.S., you'll know quality and craftsmanship are top of class. Like a sculptor examines wet clay before creating a masterpiece, Ben Lawler will walk you through the process of selection, measuring, and stitching to ensure your finished product is a work of art. Putting your trust in Ben is a guarantee that your brand will elevate to the next level. And always remember, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. A secondary at this point.
They definitely screwed over the fighters with that. And I mean, it's not uncommon that UFC is known for screwing fighters out of money. And if you noticed, I was watching recently after they got taken over by the Abu Dhabi guys, they didn't have like a couple logos on their mats, the ring. They added like an extra 20 logos. If you watch, the logos are a little smaller except for the middle one, and they have way more logos around it. Like, so here's what you're doing. You're showing people how much money you can really be making, but we're not going to let you make what we're making. So
I said it before about Conor McGregor, and they realized the mistake they made with Conor McGregor because they allowed for one person to supersede the sport. And there were people that had no idea what MMA or UFC was, but they knew who Conor McGregor was.
Ronda Rousey, same way.
Yeah, and Ronda Rousey, same way. And I think what they realized from that was that the UFC as a brand can be up there with like the MLB, NHL, NBA, but you can never allow for a fighter to supersede the sport like that again. I worry though, because it's like, you know, for the longest time we thought that like those guys were going to be pioneers for more fighter pay. But now what it's come to is like a homogenization of the sport. Like whenever I watch a UFC card now, dude, I couldn't tell you half the fighters, and I follow the sport. You know what I mean? And I feel like I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because I'm still watching the UFC, and the product is the fighters have never been better. So maybe I'm complaining about like, you know, sour grapes here. Like
they put on a lot of fights nowadays, so it's hard to keep up with all the guys. There's guys that come out of nowhere that I'm like, oh, he's had 2 fights. I didn't even watch it. You know, I was like, crap, I didn't know who he was. I mean, UFC 300 was a whole different ballgame where you knew every fighter on there, almost every fighter.
What do you think about the subscription base to pay for the pay-per-view? Because I got to be honest with you. It's not even about the money, Danny, but it drives me fucking crazy. I have to pay you monthly for the privilege of paying you for the pay-per-views.
It's ridiculous. They're really just trying to trying to squeeze every little drop out of you that they possibly can. I mean, that's why they're also getting so many people are streaming illegally. I mean, I know so many people that do illegal streaming.
You know, there's like price fixing.
Allegedly.
There's like price fixing in certain areas of the world where it's like, I think in like, I could be wrong on this one, but there are certain countries where like pay-per-views are like $20.
Yeah, there's no way people are paying $100 freaking bucks.
It's insanity. I'll be the first person to also tell you, like, me and my group of friends, we do one of 3 things. If the card is good and we want to support it, we'll buy the pay-per-view, right? If the card is dog shit, we either won't watch it or we'll stream it.
Yep.
Or 3, it's the one-offs. It's the Jake Paul's shit. And I'll be honest with you, I hate that I want to watch it. I hate that I want to culminate with it. I'm not paying for that shit.
Yeah.
You're out of your fucking minds. You know what I mean? And I'll pay.
I might have streamed those before.
Yeah. So I often say, you know, make it easier. When I was buying my car, all I could tell them was like, hey, I'm trying to give you my money. Make it easier for me to give you my money. And it's like someone needs to kind of like get Dana White, get ESPN, get WME, IMG, get the Saudis all together in a room and be like, guys, I want to support you. I want the fighters to get paid more. I want this to work. You cannot increase pay-per-view costs $15 over the last 4 years, and fighter pay for starting UFC fighters is still $12,000 and $12,000.
I still got my fingers crossed for the Saudis being involved in it because they are not trying to make money. You see how they do other things.
Yet.
They're not trying to make.
Yet.
Well, look at some of the boxing matches they put on.
Yeah,
but they're not. They're taking just such a.
You want to know? Yeah, but you want to know what they're doing, and we're not even noticing it. They realize the value of America is culture.
Ooh, good point.
Because what do we produce? What do we make?
Well,
any Westerner that looks at the Middle East and goes like, well, all you guys are oil money. What are we?
Exactly.
All we are is Hollywood and finance. So it's like we're kind of like on a bed of lies ourselves. So when you see the Middle East pumping money into boxing matches, when's the last time we had like a big heavyweight boxing match stateside? Good luck.
However, I do know people that go and train with the Saudis, and they just they like go and teach jiu-jitsu and stuff to them. And they throw money out like it's nothing because they have it.
Well, they have it, yeah.
But you're probably correct as well. It seems like they're not in any danger of ever going broke in the next 50,000 years. They get unless we get rid of oil, then they're still fine because they're not on the Forbes list because they won't allow you to know how much money they have.
Yeah,
which is insane.
The royal family down there is pretty low. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't like the trajectory of things and how they're progressing is because we as Americans are losing so much of what it is that like we actually hold value in, and if we're not careful, if we sell to the highest bidder, we're gonna lose ourselves.
Yeah, you are correct there.
And I know it's hyperbolic because we're talking about fighting now, but it's like, okay, it's fighting now. I mean, like the NBA is basically owned by China.
Yeah.
How much longer until the NFL is no longer an American sport?
That'd be scary. But
And one of the things that does kind of drive me crazy about the UFC in general is like one of the reasons they can kind of get away with this. I was actually having a conversation with a buddy of mine is when you have an international labor pool with different costs of living associated with those countries. I mean, you could be a Brazilian fighter, make 12,000 and 12,000, lose a fight, and you're still good for 6 months.
Yeah.
You could be an American, you lose that fight, you're homeless.
Yep.
And I think it was Sean Strickland who said it best, where he said, if the UFC paid out the way the NFL, MLB, or NHL does, every UFC champion would be American.
Right.
Now, that might be a little, a bit of a stretch, but I know what he's on to, and I kind of agree with him. It's like, well, if I may, Dan, if I was coming up now, I'd go into boxing.
Mm-hmm. That's why my son's boxing.
Yeah. Like, I wouldn't go into MMA. There's just no money. There's more money than there used to be, which is funny because I went into MMA, but that's also because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was 25 when I realized, like, oh man, this kind of sucks.
I got in kind of late, so I didn't. Boxing wasn't a. I was a goal to go boxer, but being a professional boxer was not on the table for me. They got kids I was watching who was like 6 years old. I'm like, yeah, man, that kid's way better than me now. Yeah. So they've been boxing since he was 2. So
do you think it's sustainable for the sport, the trajectory?
I don't know. It's really hard to say. I definitely am with you on the trajectory, on where it's going, and I don't like where it's going. But we would need a catalyst. It could be a person. They would change everything. Where he's so the one way I look at it is this: all the Muslims are coming in, and this is it's not going sideways just because I look like I look. They're destroying because they don't go out and party, and you got guys like Sean Strickland and Sean O'Malley. They go out and party. Sean O'Malley, especially, he's very well known for partying. But could he be 10 times better if he didn't? Who knows? I think he would. But you got these guys that all they do is they live in the gym and they eat healthy. They come home. They don't go out partying. They don't go out nailing strippers and shit like Sean O'Malley. They go home and all they do is party.
But I mean, I would make the same argument that there's a lot of Americans that are, no, you're fine. There's a lot of Americans that are still also as disciplined. My thing is not necessarily the cultural norms, because like you don't have to be Muslim to like not look at Bo Nickel.
Yeah,
Bo Nickel's a prime example. He's a Christian guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's clean as clean can get. Going out there, murking dudes, right? Talking about how he would work Hamzat. So it's like we also have our athletes, but I would make the argument that like if you're in the mountains of the Caucasus, where the average income annual for someone is $8,000 US. Yeah. Well, then, you could have a school dedicated to MMA, and if one of your guys makes it to the UFC and wins, that's 2.5 people's annual salary.
And that's what I was trying to get back to with that is like you have the guys, you have the guys that if we had enough money into the sport where we could compete, where these guys were like, you know what, I'm not going to go out and party. I'm going to make too much money if I don't go. That's where kind of where I was trying to go with that was rather than.
Dan's like, so listen here, religion. I'm just saying, there's a better one.
I probably would have been way better if I wasn't partying, but I did a lot of partying. So,
I don't know, man, because then you got a guy like John Jones, who's a wild child, and I mean, he's the GOAT, right? I would make the argument that different strokes for different folks. Yeah. Perhaps the partying loosened you up, being loose made you a better fighter. Some guys are better with discipline than other guys. Some guys are like a roaring flame. Some guys are like a burner on a stove, right?
Could John Jones be better if he didn't party, though? We don't love or know.
I don't know. But
it's one of those questions that we never.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to say is you can't. Okay, you have to look at the objective reality, right? He's the GOAT today. Mm-hmm. So obviously what he did worked. Yeah. Could he be better? Maybe, but like, could he be worse? I would say that the propensity to be worse would be greater than the propensity to be better, because if you're already the best, think about it, you're at 99%, right? How much harder do you have to work for that additional 1%? Extremely hard. But how much easier would it be to lose a percent?
Correct.
Much easier.
However, how many more fights would he have had if he wasn't partying and got in trouble all the times? There's that aspect to it as well.
Yeah, very fair. I mean, I would make the argument that like, it's Jim Jenkins was the one who said this to me, and he's right when he said it. He said that there's a lot of luck that comes into every athlete's career, and we never want to admit it. And I would go as far as to say that there's luck that happens in life, right? It's like you could be the John Jones, the next generation John Jones. You walk out of this building, get hit by a car, now you're paralyzed There goes all that opportunity. So it's like you could also be lucky and unlucky.
Yeah.
And something we have to acknowledge is that, like, yeah, when we have successes, not just in the cage, but in life in general, sometimes we have to chalk some of it up to the universe and say, hey, man, I could have been born without a right arm, and then we wouldn't even be here because I would have never gone out for fighting. I would have never met you, never had the podcast, right? So it's like there is something to be said about the universe and life and luck and all these other things. However, I would also say that I try to operate in the realm of reality, like physical reality that I can measure and that I can bend. And I would say that if you paid these fighters in their local currencies and not in US dollars, you would drastically change the face of the UFC tomorrow.
Probably.
Now, why do I bring this up? I am not making the argument of like paying people less. That's not what I'm making. I'm making the argument for paying people more. And that's what I'm trying to say is like there seems to be a trend of more money, more revenue. ESPN's getting a cut. WME IMG is getting a cut. The UFC brass is getting a cut. Everyone seems to be getting a cut except for, you know, when you got a top 15 fighter and they have to take loans out in between fights, that's crazy.
It's wild. I got quite a few friends that are high-level fighters. Tim Elliott, a good buddy of mine. And I got several other guys. They're not killing it at life. They're having fun. They're not killing it like they should be when they're top 20 guys.
Yeah.
You know?
Considering how many years they've been fighting as well in the UFC at that level.
I remember him getting me ready for warming me up for Pedro Nobre in the back. That's the first time I met him.
You know what irritated me was when that shit with James Krause happened, how many people were talking shit about him with like the gambling and all that. And all I could think to myself was like, how is no one talking about the fact that this guy has to gamble to to make the money he's making? I brought
that up too.
You know, like why does he feel compelled to like start this Discord channel for UFC betting when it's like if you were paying him, you know, $250,000 a fight, would he even be paying attention to Discord or any of these things?
And that's if he was actually doing it for that reasons, because he'd be just a gambling addict. We don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, I've never heard a bad word about James Krause, and I know some of the guys like Tim Elliott and a couple of Cummings.
Dude, he was a pioneer. The way we talk about Mike Rogers, the way we talk about Steve Berger, that's James Krause over in KC.
Freaking icon, man. But it's I don't know. I think he got thrown on the bus there for sure.
Well, he was a sacrificial lamb because no one. You know what's funny is you really know your friends not when you're on top, but when you're on bottom. And I would love to have James Krause on the podcast. I don't know what he could.
Saturday.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna reach out to him. I don't even know if he knows who I am though, so I kind of have to make like acquaintances and everything. We're actually going to the jiu-jitsu event too. But I don't know what he can and can't. This is the problem with litigation, active litigation. Is like I don't know what he can talk about. I don't know what is like court ordered. Hey, I cannot speak about this at all, or you know, it's not in my interest. Perhaps self-incriminating. Yeah. So like, how do you ask someone for nuance in something that they might not even want to talk about?
Yeah.
I worry though because. Do you think James is the only one? No fucking way. No fucking way. Maybe he was like the biggest one that maybe wasn't worried about how it was perceived.
It was long. All the stuff was around long time ago. Boxing was a corrupt sport. I mean, we've seen so many fights where guys need the phantom punch that he never got hit with and he fell, and guys getting dropped in the third and the betting range, betting right before the fight would go way up for that.
What do you think about that antitrust lawsuit from all the fighters that were trying to get the Ali Act to be extended into the UFC when they actually ended up just settling? So it was like. Oh, you have no idea?
I don't know a whole lot about it.
So it was like Randy Couture, John Fitch.
Was this Mark Hunt thing too?
Yes, Mark Hunt. It was a class action lawsuit. Yep. What it was like a bunch of older fighters. Yeah. Older fighters than me, not older fighters. But they came together to essentially sue the UFC for antitrust lawsuits, saying, "Hey, you guys bought out Pride, you bought out Strikeforce, like you're
became an monopoly.
You're at the very least oligopoly, but what you're more than anything doing is you're buying out competition and you're not competing fairly." And it was like, I remember like 7 years ago when the lawsuit was like first brought up, you know, the UFC top brass were like, they're not going to get anything. And then in judgment and findings and all that, they actually found evidence. And then they got the emails and the calls and all this stuff. And then you saw like some of the interactions between high up in the UFC. And they were getting to a point where like they had a legitimate case to pursue with the UFC. And then that's when the lawyers got into a room and a settlement offer was made, and then they dropped all the charges. And
I didn't know the ending of that. My bad.
No, you're fine.
I knew about it, but I didn't know the ending of it.
Yeah.
So.
Long story short, they sold out. So like, it's like, I forget who it was that I was talking to, but we were essentially Jake Roberts, I believe, where I was like, no. Speak of the devil, Bree. It was Bree that I was saying that to. I said like the one thing that would fix MMA in a heartbeat is the Ali Act getting extended into MMA, because then you don't have these like intrusive contracts that the UFC has where they have first bid opportunities and all this other shit. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy to me how like you have contracts with these fighters, then you have management in the middle. The whole business of MMA, I don't want to say is parasitic. But it seems like everyone's making money but the fighters, which is insane to me.
Now there is the option of this. I mean, I'm
talking about the high level, the high level, the UFC.
You are signing the contract.
Yes.
I mean,
But just because
you kind of feel like you're forced to because you have no other option. I'll bring up Finney. When Finney called me up to have me come over, wanted to sign on with him. I sent his contract back probably 6 times. Yeah. I was acting like I was a rock star. I was like, yellow M&Ms in the back room, that's that kind of shit. And he sent it back, and he agreed to every one of it, and he stood by every bit of his contract.
What was the things that you weren't like? What was it? Show and fight money?
Show and win money. I wanted to fight on ONE FC or get paid this amount of money because I wanted a ONE FC fight. I wanted to be able to. Because there wasn't, Rogers wanted me to be at 115, which I did not want to be. But I was like, I wanted 115-pound fights. I wanted all sorts of stuff.
And Finney gave it to you.
Yeah, he gave it all, and I went this many fights a year because I was terrified I was going to get put on the shelf and stuff like that. I went this many fights a year. He agreed to all of it. He stood by all of it.
Can you explain what that means, get put on the shelf?
If you sign with the company, and there's a lot of companies that do that. Boxing was one. My buddy Ryan Coyne, he got that done to him by Don King. Ryan Coyne was one of the best fighters in the world, and he signed with Don King, and Don King put him on the shelf and would not give him a fight. And
this is before the Ali Act?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure how that.
Because if it was after the Ali Act, then there's no way.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain it was before.
Okay.
This was I guess about 10, 12 years ago, something like that. Whenever it started, I can't remember. But he got shelved, and then he was trying to get fights, and he was a top contender in the world, and they shelved him forever. He couldn't. It was the prime of his career. Ryan was a little bit older guy. He was about to be done with it. And then finally they give him a guy. It was a short notice fight against a journeyman, and he ends up getting cut in the fight. Or I think he lost by a cut in that fight. Or he lost the fight, and then they shelved him again. I don't think that was the last fight. And Ryan was winning world titles. He had like WBC champion or something like that at cruiserweight. He's a great guy, and he got screwed. So that was one of my big fears. I watched it happen. I grew up watching boxing where Don King would do shit like that to people, and I was always worried that was going to happen to me because not that I was great enough that you should shelf me, but if you have no repercussion for it.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody shelves you, they say you're not allowed to go to another company. We watched that happen a few times where guys would leave the UFC and go do something on their own, and the UFC would be like, no, they shut down the whole promotion. They shut down an Affliction show or something like that, or a fight for Affliction.
Right after their inaugural show, yep. I believe it was Fedor versus Arlovsky, I believe. I think it was Fedor and Arlovsky. They had one show and they were done.
Yep. That was a great fight too. Arlovsky almost had him.
I don't know how I feel with exclusivity contracts in the fight game. I really don't. I think one of the things that makes boxing good and bad is the ability for these fighters to negotiate. I mean, the one thing that can be said about the UFC is they do put on some of the greatest fights because the guys can't run away from each other. Mm-hmm. But then the argument will also be made, like that same premise of the guys can't run away from each other. What you're really saying is like you're boxing them in, mm-hmm. and you're forcing them into like the same alleyway, and then they have no negotiation, they have no leverage. It's like, let's say you're number 1, I'm number 2, and you're the champion, I'm the contender, right? And you and I can get behind closed doors and be like, listen, I promise not to accept the fight with you unless a certain number is
Mm-hmm.
met, and you promise not to fight me unless a certain number is met. Yeah. And we go into the negotiating table, and we can kind of work that way out, unless we don't have collective bargaining. We can't, get together and make these kind of transactions, or at the very least, we have no power to even make that. Like, the UFC comes down and says like, well, this is our contract with you. You signed for $500,000 to show, $500,000 to win, regardless of who the opponent was. We'll give you pay-per-view money if you become the champion. All this other stuff. It's a very weird business. It's a very predatory predatory might be a strong word to use.
It
It is borderline predatory what they're doing with some of these fighters, especially with the money that they're bringing in. And I always thought that the Conor McGregors and the Ronda Rouseys would make this better, not worse.
And you're not wrong about any of those points. I do think predatory is the correct word because it is kind of predatory what they're doing. I'm looking at these up promotions. ONE FC. ONE FC I love watching, and from what I've understood is they are pretty open to you being able to go and do whatever you want. I mean, if you're like Demetrius
Johnson.
Yep, he went and did a jiu-jitsu tournament. You're not allowed to do that in UFC.
Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. What you really mean to say is that you're not allowed to do it unless you get their okay. Because there are guys that compete there's a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments, a lot of jiu-jitsu competitions on the UFC network, right? So it's like if you're going into something like that, I'm sure the UFC would be great and fine with that, as long as you don't have a fight coming up, as long as like something's not like on the line there.
Not what I heard, but I could be wrong. I mean, I heard the stories about not being able to ride motorcycles and stuff, and you got Cowboy. He wasn't allowed to ride bulls and stuff like that because he was in the contract. It was part of his contract. He wasn't allowed to go and do stuff like that. Have you ever heard those?
No.
Oh, they have some pretty. There's contracts.
That seems invasive.
It is.
And like, if I may,
well, you could get hurt, and then you're
yeah, but that's borderline. You can't.
You get hurt. I get hurt more sparring.
Can I say something that I've learned in the last 5 years of doing? Sorry, in the last 5 years of my life, in the last 2 years of doing business, and that is, you can write up any contract you want. I can put on a piece of paper like Dan O'Connor agrees to be my property. And then if I go take that, like you could sign that contract and I say, hey, you and I have a contract. But if you were to ever be like, hey, this contract isn't actually legal and you can't enforce it, and I try to take that to a judge, the judge would laugh in my face and be like, there's an amendment against slavery, Arion. You can't own people. Yeah. Right? So it's like you can type anything out you want. I can create a contract out of thin air and have you sign it, and now I quote unquote have a contract with you. But whether or not it actually be enforced in the eyes of the law, that's a completely different thing. Our
fighters smart enough to do that though.
Our fighters smart enough to do that.
They're just gonna sit on their hands, but I guess I can't.
Or do they have enough resources to even fight it? Because that's the other thing, is like they're all broke. Yep. I don't want to say they're all broke.
A lot of them are.
That's hyperbolic. But what I am saying is, I am known for fighting, and if I could take all the money I made from fighting and put it on the palm of my hand compared to what I make this year alone, it would shock people, right? And here's the other thing. I talk to a lot of UFC fighters, and the conversations I have with all of them, every single one of them, and there's like 6 different ones from different walks of life, black, white, tall, short, one's a woman, okay? Everyone is all talking about how to divert and how to have multiple revenue streams that don't include. One person was talking to me about Twitch streaming. The other person was talking about, the girl was talking about starting an OnlyFans, but not like sexual content, like so that people can talk to her and message her. Like, and I'm just like, listen, man, if there's a market for it, do it. But like, what I'm trying to say is, why is it that like, do you think, take your average NHL player. I don't even know hockey that well, right? But average NHL player, are they having these conversations? Are they talking about starting an OnlyFans or like starting a Twitch stream or whatever? That's not correlated to just fun. No, these guys are trying to do it because they're not making enough money. And it's like a shame. I don't know. I have so many gripes with so many things about the MMA structure, like the UFC and MMA structure. I still hate the you lose half your money if you lose a fight. Could you imagine a bigger blow to a fighter? They just got knocked out, submitted, or lost a close decision. They've been training for 3 months for this camp. They sold all these tickets. The crowd was full and supporting them, and they came up short. They're in the back, feeling like all their training was for nothing. They're questioning whether they can even do this sport. And then in comes the promoter. Hey, kid, here's half your money. Go fuck yourself.
Yep. And how many guys had to take fights because they were had to take fights hurt because they needed.
They have to.
I've seen it all the time. It happened to me. I wasn't really.
That's how the thing with James Krause happened. His fighter went out there hurt, and they bet against him.
I've seen it.
But he had to fight hurt. Dude, TJ Dillashaw is a prime example of it. DJ's shoulder is coming out in the fight.
No insurance too, and if you get hurt during the fight, you can put it under the insurance.
Yeah.
There's another big one. I mean, there's a lot of cool tricks guys that I know, but you shouldn't have to do that. If you're hurt, you should be able to bow out
You
and
want
not
to know
have to lose
you want
your
to know
stuff.
the easiest trick to healthcare that I wish more people knew? Start an LLC, buy healthcare under the LLC, make yourself an employee of the healthcare of your own LLC, and then buy health insurance through your LLC for yourself.
It's a great idea.
It's like it's the easiest way to
I
get
have an
health
LLC,
insurance.
but
It's $50 to make an LLC. Then you go to a marketplace for healthcare as a business, not as an individual. The metrics are completely different. Now, it's a 50-50, meaning you as the employer pay the other half of that insurance, but you'll still get better insurance, better deductibles, better healthcare.
you should start a podcast and teach people this stuff.
You know, the problem is too, though, is like, you know, these rules are set in place because it's like the minority of people that know it. And then if you make knowledge readily available, I think personally one of the greatest what's the word I'm looking for here? Snake oil. No, not snake oil, but like corruptions of America is the need for insurance. Because it's like these insurance companies will all, if you're going to offer insurance and you're not going to make it a utility, when these insurance companies are operating on profit margins, what are we doing here?
And what's insane is if you have I got in a bad accident a couple years ago where I had to get rods in my neck. My neck was already screwed, but I had to get fusion and get rods in my neck. My neck was already screwed up from fighting for years. I fought my entire fight career messed up. Like if you guys ever wonder why I was a ground guy that never shot takedowns, my neck was bad. I was like, I'm gonna try to knock him down, or he's gonna knock me down. I'm gonna submit him when he knocks me down. When I got this done, I was like, they showed me the end all bill. I was like, what the hell? $100,000 I owe? Even I was like,
After insurance?
Oh, no. I wasn't allowed to use my insurance because it was an accident. So I was looking at it was $100,000. Yeah, because it was an accident. Somebody else's fault. So
you couldn't use your insurance. You had to use theirs.
Yep. I had to go from that. So when I was sitting there and I saw the end bill and my lawyer was looking at it and I was like, dude, we're screwed here. I was like, I don't know what the hell to do. I was like, there's no way I can pay this. I was like, he was like, well, he goes, don't worry, I'm going to talk to him. And he talked him down to like 40,000, 100,000 to 40,000. He goes, yeah, I'm just telling him this is what we're going to give him. I was like, what the? I didn't know you could even do that. He was like, yeah. He goes, you get an attorney to do it, and they can talk your bill down and like this. So I got really lucky. It was a little bit of the money.
Well, healthcare costs aren't like it's not like a fixed price.
Oh, I saw the bills. They were freaking wild.
Yeah.
It was like toilet paper was like $30. I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
I was like, we got to give you a sponge bath. So they gave me a sponge bath. That was like $1,000.
And here's the other thing.
First of all,
who's doing the auditing? Who's doing the
Yeah.
auditing? When we had our first child, I want to say the entire thing at the hospital was like $25,000.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the itemized bill of it, there was like a bunch of shit in there
Yeah.
that we never did.
Yep.
That we never took advantage of, or that we never used.
Yep.
And they're like, so I asked them afterwards, and their response, the lady at the front desk's response was, well, don't worry, your insurance will take care of that. And I was like, no, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
Like, imagine I'm a plumber,
Yeah.
and you want me to fix your toilet. I go in there, I work an hour, and then when I fix your toilet, I give you the bill. I say I worked 3 hours. I fix a toilet and a sink. You would tell me, go fuck yourself, dude. That's not what you did.
If you get caught scamming an insurance company, you go to jail.
But if it's the other way around, it's good business.
Exactly. It's freaking wild because I did look at my itemized bills from my kids were born. And I looked
So
over.
you paid $40,000 or they paid $40,000?
I got lucky. A charity actually paid the rest of my stuff off. So
Jesus
I was
Christ.
like, because I got money from my accident, and I got a phone call. So I was about in tears about that one. I was like, dude, I got a call. And they're like, hey, we just want to let you know I was like, I had my wife call, and she's like, yeah, they said they can't talk to me. So I called, and they're like, yeah, we had a Catholic charity pay your bill because right around Christmas. I'm like, what? Like, holy shit! So they paid like $30,000 on my bill because it was sitting on the. It was wild. I was like, I never get lucky like that, you know. So it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I was going down the bill, and I was like, well, what can we write off of this? Because some of this shit's not. I was like, they tell me I ate like 3 meals a day. I was like, I didn't eat 1 meal a day. I was eating painkillers and like Pez.
I worry though, because like, what's the response, right? Like, I don't want bigger government. I don't want government to get involved. But the argument could be made that because the government is involved that's why we're here. Like,
Probably.
okay, if car insurance wasn't mandatory to drive, okay, you would have how many people on the road tomorrow driving uninsured? And then it would basically collapse the insurance market.
Correct.
So it's like it can only exist because what's going to happen is you're going to have the people that are paying, and then the people that aren't paying, and how many people are going to get that aren't paying, are going to get people that are paying, and then the delta between the losses and earnings are going to just basically bankrupt these insurance companies.
Even if you have the money to cover whatever accident you could possibly be in, you still have to have insurance.
Yeah, which is crazy. Dude, I'll give you some anecdotal evidence. My car payment is $1,100 a month. My insurance for my car payment is $350 a month. My insurance for my car is more than some people's car payment.
100%.
It's insane to me. And I remember, like, when I bought the car, I was like, listen, you know, the age-old adage, right? Buying the car is like the cheapest part of owning a car. And I knew that. I knew the property taxes and all this other shit. I was prepared for it. What I wasn't prepared for is for my insurance to triple from what I had and then what I needed. And then over the course of time, too, the best part is when my insurance went up, I want to say 6 months ago, I wasn't in a car accident. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't get a speeding ticket. I'm just like, what is going on? They're like, oh, well, there were thefts in your area. So because of the zip code, we had to increase. Kia, buddy. And I'm just like, fuck me. Like, I could do everything right and my rates still go up because everybody else. It's a racket. That was the word I'm looking for earlier. It's a racket. Insurance is a racket. It's a, I don't know if you want to call it a means to an end or if it's like a doldrums lull issue where the issue is because it exists and you need it because it's an issue. It's like, why do I need insurance? Because we're mandatory. Why is it mandatory? Because we should have it. Why should we have it? Because it's mandatory.
Yep. My daughter's 18. We just had to we got her a car and had to put her on insurance and it's astronomical.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. No. And what's crazy too is like if I was in a car accident 8 years ago and my insurance didn't pay for the accident because it was 3 cars. I was the middle car. So I got rear-ended and the force of that rear-ending made me hit the guy in front of me. So the guy in front of me said, like their insurance said, we're not going to pay this because someone rear-ended you. And then the insurance of the guy that rear-ended me said, we'll pay for the rear bumper, but the insurance from the guy in front of you should pay for that because we didn't hit that. And I'm just like, what is going on? So they paid for my new rear bumper. The other insurance just wouldn't pay for the front bumper. They wouldn't pay for the front bumper. So I was like, okay, I went to my insurance company. My insurance company said, we're not at fault.
Yeah.
They have to pay for it. Yeah. And I was like, well, can you talk to them? No. And I'm just like, so I had to pay for my own front bumper. Yeah. I was fucking furious. And that was, you know, 23-year-old Arion, right?
No money.
Dude, $1,000 to me at the time, Danny, was like, holy shit money.
I got a big dent in my car right now from, I just knew I was working in North City, a process servant, and somebody smoked my car when I was in a building. I was like, son of a bitch. I'm not even calling the cops. There's no point. We're in St. Louis. I don't solve murders. So I was like, the guy probably didn't have insurance anyway. So I have a big dent in my car. So I went to go get it fixed. I called my insurance company. They're like, yeah, but it's gonna raise your rates. I'm like, I'll drive around.
And that's the other thing too, right? Is like they'll actively like tell you not to use your insurance because it's gonna cost you more. Than it's like, why do I have insurance? I have insurance for in case shit happens. And then when shit happens, now it's like a mental calculus of like, okay, well my deductible's $500, and then this is gonna be $800 to replace. But if I use that and I only get $300, then my rates are going to go up next, you know, when it comes time to renew.
More out in a year.
So it's like I basically have insurance to then like calculate whether or not I ever want to use it.
All the time. I've had my window shot out. My driver window shot out. My windshield shot out, and I was like, it's like there's no point because it's going to be $1,000. I'm going to do $500. They're going to up my shit another $50 or $100 for a windshield, and then I'm going to be paying $1,200 a month for a $500 windshield. So I screw it.
There's so many little things when I look at life. There's so many little things that are just wrong, like incorrect, between like overtaxation, the health of our food and our wellness, the price of healthcare, the technological advances that we have available to us, yet no one knows how any of it works. You know, in a lot of ways. I said this to Greg when he was in. I said, technology has made us no more intelligent, just more aware of how dumb we really are. And the more you look at the landscape of our society, of how we function, I mean, like, I saw this video of a Gen Z who just got to the point where like she's paying taxes, and she said it best. She's like, I'm being charged to work. And I was like, yeah, kid, welcome to the real fucking world where none of this shit makes sense.
You're going to get charged to spend your money
that
you already got charged to get.
Oh, did you spend your money on something that's like tangible? Now you're going to be charged every year for owning that tangible thing.
It's wild.
Better have insurance for it.
Getting to your older age, you start seeing this crazy. I mean, the younger kids have no idea what they're about to get into. My daughter hasn't started to work yet. She's been working her butt off and got scholarships in college and everything, and she's about to start working when she goes to college. And I was like, I can't wait to explain to her how this works. So I don't want to get ahead of myself to tell her. I should be like, wait till she brings home her paycheck. It's like, I make $12 an hour, and then see what she actually brings home. Like, what do you mean you got to pay Social Security?
Hot take. Anyone making less than $60,000 a year, individual, so 120,000 household, should not have an income tax.
I agree.
Just what is the point of taxing my income when I'm just going to get like a $3,000-$4,000 return? And then like the net is like almost neutral. It's like, I think the real effective tax rate, if you're a family that makes like under $100,000 a year and you have 2 children, is like net zero. Yeah. So it's like, I'm just basically like giving you a forward loan for you to give it back to me later. But because of the time value of money, when you give me my money back a year from now, it'll be worth less than when I gave it to you up front.
How about the crazy part of when you go up to right, you go barely hit a tax, go up, you get a raise, and you go up just a little bit of a tax bracket, and then all of a sudden you made $1,000 less a week from that raise. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, because now you're at a different. You made $1,000 less. I'll tell you one of the things. Whenever liberals come at me for my stance on taxation, I look at them. I go, "You're the problem. You're the reason why I hate taxation." Because, and I use the corporate income tax as like the prime example of how you will always be behind the ball because the legislators, like, we are complaining about the rules of a game. And then the second those rules change, new rules will be adopted immediately to keep that same structure. So I don't know if you recall this, but about 20 years ago, there was a big push for the corporate income tax rate to essentially say like these CEOs, these heads of these giant companies are getting paid, $10 million, $15 million, $20 million bonuses. They don't need this kind of money. Why is it that they're taxed the same as us? We need to have a corporate income tax. And then all these dumb middle-class white people are like, yeah, like let's stick it to the man. So they pass this legislation. Now when you get a bonus check at the end of the year, Christmas bonus check for $1,000, 48% of that gets taxed at the federal level. I'm not even talking about state, because it still gets taxed at the state level too. 48%. When you get $1,000 bonus, you keep $540 of it. Make that shit make sense. Anyway, here's the beauty of it. You and I, we get hit with this shit now whenever we get bonuses. Those CEOs that they were trying to stick it to, you want to know how they're all paid now? Options bonus through stock. What is the capital gains tax? What's the effective tax rate? 18 to 20%. You and I, because these people thought they were altruistic and progressive and they thought they were going to stick it to the man, you and I get taxed at 48% whenever we get a bonus. Now the CEO of Boeing or the CEO of whoever, they're going to get taxed at 18 to 20% because they're going to get stock options. And they'll kind of like, if they're smart, they won't even liquidate all of it at once. And they'll just kind of pick an off year like, oh, do we have like, because they all have side hustles. They all have side businesses. 100%. Let's show some losses here and there. Let's show some depreciation on assets that we have for our real estate company. And we have like 80,000. Let's sell a little bit of stock now because now the time's getting good. It's a game. All this is a fucking game.
It is. And people don't understand it's a game. I get into arguments with people all day long on Facebook, clearly. But I watch the liberals and the Republicans, everybody that's arguing. I laugh at both of them because I'm in the middle. Yeah. I was like, you guys understand you're the same coin, you're the other side of it. Yeah. You're both are morons.
Do you think there's a uniparty?
Oh, man, I'd love to see something. But a uniparty, like, you mean both of them together?
I think at the federal level. Maybe not at the state, because the state one's kind of like harder to micromanage. But at the federal level, I think that they're like the minority and the majority leaders of both the House and the Senate come together and say, all right, what's the initiative?
I agree there. Yeah. I didn't understand what you mean by that. My bad. No, yeah, I agree 100%. That's what it is. It's, it's the same, it's eagle, same freaking left wing and right wing of the eagle. They're the same eagle. We're getting screwed left and right by either side, no matter what. If you're not part of them, you're getting screwed regardless.
I just don't get to what end. I often think to myself, like, okay, what are the variables at play? Like, what do I not know? You know what I mean? And I think to myself,
we'd probably lose our mind about what we don't know.
But that's the thing, right? So like the one thing that keeps me sane, Dan, whenever I look at the political landscape, not just like nationally but internationally, is I think to myself, there are people with much more information than I have, who should, by virtue of their experience, be much more knowledgeable than I am. And they are choosing to make this tactical decision. There has to be something that I'm missing that makes this make sense. And that's the only reason I can sleep sound at night. Because if I just operate on what I see and what I'm hearing and what I'm reading, I'm convinced that we're either led by idiots or traitors. It's one of the two.
Or both.
Or both.
I mean, how are we so many $1 trillion in debt to other countries?
I have a theory about it.
How's the entire world in debt to... That makes no sense.
I have a theory about it.
What is it?
I think you hold the world ransom. Okay, you see how Saudi Arabia... okay, two pieces of information that I have to hit you with really quickly. BRICS just recently invited Egypt, Iran, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia into BRICS, right? Mm-hmm. Like, hey, come on in, guys. And BRICS is basically an initiative to get everybody off the petroleum dollar. Mm-hmm. Subsequently, literally like I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks after that, Saudi Arabia publicly announced that going forward, they're not going to renew their petroleum dollar standard, and that going forward, you'll be able to buy oil from Saudi Arabia in any currency of your choosing, yuan, ruble, what have you. The reason this is important is because ever since we got off the gold standard with Nixon, we never had anything to peg our dollar to. So like the value of the dollar is essentially, every crypto bro is going to tell you like, oh, well, Bitcoin is the same fiat. Like whenever you say anything about how cryptocurrency isn't real, they'll return with, well, so neither is the dollar. And they're correct with that. The only thing that I had as like a saving grace to that argument was that like, yeah, but we're the petroleum dollar. And I would make the argument that being pegged to oil is infinitely better than being pegged to gold, because everyone is always going to need oil for the next 100 years, okay? However, that was building on the calculus that we were the petroleum standard, that you had to deal in dollars to get this. Now with Saudi Arabia getting off of it, it's kind of like a push, a nudge to America saying, hey, motherfucker, the status quo does not need to stand. And this can be changed at any moment. Insert the national debt. When we say that we're, $36 trillion in debt, what do we mean by that? We mean that there is a deficit of 36 trillion US dollars. Where is that? It could be anywhere in the world, right? Like we spent money we didn't have by printing it or digitally transacting it. That means there's $36 trillion in the ether that we don't have accounting for or taxation for. Not accounting, but taxation for. That's $36 trillion of value everybody else holds, or we might even hold ourselves, that if we were to hyperinflate or essentially crush the dollar, it would take the world down with it, regardless of the petroleum dollar at all. I'll give you a smaller example of what it is from the macro sense to the micro sense. I owe you $100, okay? And every year I print 10. And I print 10, I give you 1, now I owe you 99, right? Well, what if 1 year I print 1,000 and I still owe you 99? But now I go to someone else and I go, hey, here's $500, but also an IOU for $500. What are you going to say?
Yeah.
What the fuck, dude? Where's my money? And I tell you, hey, I'm going to borrow another 100 from you, okay? But this time it'll be at a higher interest rate. And you think to yourself, well, okay, well, they owe me money, but it's a higher interest rate, so it's actually more money over the long run. And if I keep doing this over and over and over and over again, I'm left with a deficit of $36 trillion. You're left with IOUs totaling $5 trillion, what have you. And now there's talk. All these other people are talking about, hey, let's get off the dollar, let's get off the dollar. Do you want to get off the dollar when you have $5 trillion of IOUs? You're like, hold up, pay me back, give me my money. And then I want that money to still have value when I get it. So I think the deficit, truly, if you're like extrapolating this to the long run, is just a way to hold the monetary global market hostage. Because in order for you to kill the value of the dollar, you have to kill the value it has with you. And if you're holding on to that bag, you're killing your own economy. When Greece went under back in 07, 08, when they had to file bankruptcy, Greece, the country of Greece, who's known for what? Olive oil production and tourism, almost took the entire European Union with it. Imagine if the U.S. economy were to say tomorrow, we're going to stop consuming. goodbye global market.
Yeah.
It's gone the next day. So I think the deficit at this point is unsustainable. Like if you're looking at this from a financial perspective, you can't tax your way out of it unless you have an AI revolution that's in terms of scope, it has to be magnitudes above the Industrial Revolution, which it should be. So unless you have an AI revolution that creates so much prosperity and production that we no longer need human labor, okay, maybe we get out of this deficit, or it's by design. We did this on purpose because we knew.
Has to be then. Not you explained it a little bit. I didn't understand it probably to the level I probably should have until you explained it like that. So thank you for that. But
this is a theory. This is just a theory.
I think you're probably right now.
Because it's like, let's say Saudi Arabia wants to get off the we were talking about earlier about how the Middle East is having all these big fights. Mm-hmm. What are they paying in?
Cash.
U.S. dollars.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're so flush with it. Why? Because for the last 50 years, they've only been trading exclusively in U.S. dollars. So yeah, they might want to take other currencies now, or maybe it's all just like the other variable, Dan, is this could be geopolitics on a global scale. The Crown Prince hates Biden. Yeah. Maybe he's doing this specifically because he wants Trump to get elected. And once Trump gets elected, he gets back on the petroleum dollar because he realizes the almighty dollar is a noose around his neck already.
We're seeing how the dollar's dropping in value now.
Yes and no. Yes in this country, no in the rest of the world.
I guess.
Inflation affects us much more, or like the percentage, like, so if we have year-over-year inflation of 10%, okay, we feel that more because our cost of living increases drastically. But if you took $1 over to Albania and you tell them that that dollar has lost 10% of its value, it's still crazy amounts of value to them. Does that make sense? Yeah. So like for us, what it's doing is it's bringing us down to their level. It's not bringing them up to ours. So we feel it more than they do. That's their status quo.
The only thing I ever hit on that was that movie Road Trip, where they went at, like, they were in like you ever seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, where they went to like,
this is where I parked my car.
This is where I parked my car. He went. They had like really over like $1.50, and they're eating steak, and they're buying suits, and they're partying all night.
Yeah, it's the means of production. That's why I said it before, and I'll say it again. Money is a tool. Capital is a tool. What you're really saying is, what is the means of production? Yeah. What is when I take that dollar, what can I get for that dollar? And usually when we're talking about value, we're talking about like what we can acquire with that money. But the way we need to start looking at money is what we can produce with this. And we've lost that as Americans. We've lost that. We started looking at money as like, what can I get with this instead of what can I do with this? So anyway, Danny, it's an hour and a half later. We talked about everything. STL MMA, drama. MMA's a racket.
I love to see you animated when you talk about. That's one of my favorite things to do is when watch on the podcast is when you get animated when you start talking about geopolitics and stuff.
This is the shit that matters.
Yeah.
Everything else that we talked about
today.
You
talked about my pay grade a little bit a couple times, and I was like, "Thanks for bringing it back down."
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. I was like, I saw you. My eyes must have glazed over once. You're like, "Let me break it down for you." There we go. Thanks.
My problem is, this is how my brain is wired. Like, if you asked me, I couldn't tell you who's in the NBA finals right now. I have no fucking clue.
Our political stances, as we spoke in the past, are the exact same.
It's not even about political stance. Yeah. It's about what I find interesting. Yeah. Like, okay, why do I find fighting interesting? Because it's primal. It's real.
Yeah.
Why do I find the current legislative session fascinating? Because it's real.
Yes.
The decisions that they make, the laws that they pass or choose not to pass will have direct correlation to me in my life. The way I equate it to people is, let's say every year the UFC and ONE FC and all these fight promotions came together to change the rules of MMA. Everyone would be looking at that like, okay, what are they going to do? How are they going to change it? Can I now soccer kick to opponent? This year we can soccer kick to the opponents. Now it changes the sport, right? That goes on every month at our country level and more abroad, world level, every month, and no one bats an eye to the shit that changes constantly that actually affects their life. But then they're worried about which soccer team kicked the ball in the net. That's important.
I learn a lot of shit listening to your podcast. That's why I enjoy it.
Danny, I appreciate that. I don't know what this podcast is going to be.
Who knows? It could be something different each episode.
Yeah.
Start off with shit talking and bounce to geopolitical debates.
Me and my producer Matt, we have this conversation all the time about like, are we having too many fighters on? Because I don't want this to be like a MMA podcast. I want it to be a podcast, like where I'm just talking to people. And the way I said it to Matt was, you know, when Joe Rogan or when all these other guys have people on, fighting might be the common ground that we share, but then the superlatives are the ones that are going to make every episode different.
Yeah.
So that the Danny episode might have sprinkles, like a Venn diagram, sprinkles of the similarities, but then it'll be completely different from the Moriarty or the Steve Berger or the Mike Rogers, whatever episode. My goal is a subtle familiarity. You know what you're going to get with this, while simultaneously every guest should bring a different paradigm.
That was one of my worries because me and Berger, as I told you, me and Berger have the same like origin story for fighting and stuff. So I was like, man, crap! I have almost the exact same wording for how I got into fighting and all that stuff as Steve did. So hopefully it doesn't sound like it's a repeat episode.
No, you guys are two completely different guys. But that being said, you do share a lot of similarities. Dan, before we get off, your wife has a band.
Yes.
And I got to be honest with you. Matt knows this very well. I am terrible with like rock music. Mm-hmm. So can you explain this band to me?
She does country. I was like, when I was getting done fighting, she was kind of, she supported me my entire fight career and everything. So I got done fighting, and she kind of was like, you know, I supported you this entire time, and I got to chase my dream. So I had money in the bank, and that's why I was like, you know what? So I made some phone calls, and I got her in a recording studio, and she started blowing up, and her band is exploding right now.
No shit.
Yeah, man. She was playing at the Lake of the Ozarks, a big old place, last weekend. She plays. It kind of drives me nuts because I never see her anymore because she's always doing it. They're talking about her doing a tour here soon. Or she has a bunch of songs on
country music.
Yep, country music. Country. One of my best friends is a guitarist. He's a rock guitarist, but I've been friends with him since 6th grade.
No shit. Maybe next time I have your wife on.
Yeah, it's Crystal County Whiskey Rebels. So yeah, she's blowing up. She plays all around town. Plays. She has a couple states she plays in as well. They're flying her to Nashville here soon. She can play there and stuff like that. So pretty cool.
Do they have music like on YouTube or anything?
Actually, all streaming platforms. So yeah,
you know what? With her permission, we should do the outro with one of their songs.
Yeah.
Or maybe the intro too. We'll talk about it off
That'd be awesome,
air.
man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, dude. I'm all for it.
Not that come on here just talk about her stuff like we did.
Damn, we did an hour and a half of your stuff and my stuff. At least we could do is like
blast, man.
Dude, I can I just say that I think it's beautiful how she supported you,
and
now you're supporting her. I love that dichotomy. I love the give and get, and hopefully this is what you thought it would be.
Yeah, I did. I was wondering if we were gonna talk about politics at all.
Dude, that's like a given.
We agree on everything.
Danny,
love you, buddy. Thank you.